Moses Mokaya Mogesi and Alvin Mondoh Juma are live with me. You guys need to tell me on Facebook if you already can watch what we are doing here. So we are trying to launch this show pretty early. We will be joined by the CAS TV crew. I haven't seen them joining the show yet to set up their system, but they should be joining us briefly so that they transmit the show at around 7:30. A big welcome to all of you who are watching us from all over the world. This is pretty unusual for me because today I have to switch to English. So if I go into German at some point, you have to understand, because this is my, it's not normal for this show. People are used to me, you know, babbling in Nandi. So let's get down to business. Today we are talking about diabetes. My name is Serone Rapchelule Jason. I live in Germany, near Hamburg, between Hamburg, Bremen one side, Hanover on the other. I work for a multinational company called Mars Incorporated. It's not the sponsor of this show, neither does it have anything to do with this show. Just an FYI. I have lived in Germany with my family for the last 14 or so years. 7 of those at the University of Munich, the Technical University of Munich, where I worked as an associate professor and a postdoc. At the end of that, in 2013, I left the university and joined the private sector. Home is Nandi Hills in the Rift Valley. And I live in Germany with my family, Edna, and our 3 children, Felix, Felicia, and Heinz. This show is usually carried on Saturday or Sunday, but we have a fixture on Sunday that is ongoing. And the theme for today is diabetes. And I have 2 specialists with me. Dr. Alvin Mondoh Juma is a medical doctor and diabetologist. He will tell us what that means. And I have Moses Mokaya Mogesi, who is a PhD candidate, doing it at 2 institutions, the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, where I was a part-time lecturer at one point, and the University of, I think it's called Katholische Universität Leuven, if I'm not wrong, in Belgium. A big welcome, gentlemen, and thank you very much for accepting this invitation to be part of this show. I encourage you, if you can, to use the share button on Facebook to share with your audience so that they are part of this conversation. If you have any questions, just drop them on the chat. I will be able to follow once in a while. But for now, I think I hand over to, let's see. At the bottom of my screen is Moses Mokaya. I think we start with you, Moses.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm going to switch so that you are highlighted as you speak. Moses,
okay,
over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Serone, for this opportunity. It's an enormous opportunity, and I'm happy that you're coming from a background where I've worked from before. I'm a nutritionist, having done quite some work in Kenya, worked with the academic model providing access to healthcare in Eldoret, the Impaired, commonly known as Impaired. I was there for nearly 7 years before I left and joined Carbohydrate University, where I teach as a lecturer. And now I'm doing my PhD study. It's a collaborative program where I'm working with Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology under a program called the Legume Center of Excellence of Food and Nutrition Security, and also a university in Belgium called KU Leuven, where we are working from. I have a nutrition background, having worked in HIV care for all those years, 7 years, been in teaching positions at the Baraton University and Kabarak University now. So my area of interest in my PhD work, which I've been doing for the last 3 years, almost 3 years now, is in diabetes, and specifically looking at the public health dimension of diabetes, looking at the prevention, and of course the care of people that have diabetes. So that is where I'm coming from, and I'm happy to be in this show. I hope the experiences and the knowledge that I have will be helpful to the listeners. And thank you very much, Dr. Serene, once again for this opportunity. And I look forward to a good session today.
Great. I mean, Moses, it's not that I'm letting you off. I just want to go to Juma also. I see he's trying to communicate to me now. Alvin, do you want to take it from here? Just tell us briefly about yourself, and then I will go back to you guys to sort of get a bit of detail as we buy time to get the audience from the TV, to set it up.
All right.
Alvin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Serene, for this great honor of hosting us. Indeed, I'm awed by what technology can do to bring Kenyans in diaspora together this time, to share very useful knowledge, and improve the lives of our people, within Kenya and globally at large. So as you've introduced me at the beginning, as I'm a medical doctor, I'm a diabetologist, which means basically a doctor that deals with issues with diabetes, but broadly speaking, lifestyle diseases, because diabetes is first and foremost a lifestyle disease. Of course, we'll go into details, other forms of diabetes, but what's mostly concerning us today is the lifestyle aspect of diabetes. Apart from that, I'm a family physician. That's my postgraduate training. And I trained for my basic medical degree in Poland. So I qualified from the Warsaw Medical University. Then I proceeded to the Aga Khan University in Nairobi for my master's in medicine, which was a postgraduate study in family medicine. And then I did my postgraduate training in diabetes from the University of South Wales. Well, I'm a global citizen. I hope between Poland, Kenya, and Ireland, that's where I practice in those three countries. My area of interest in diabetes is, the new concept or the new kid on the block, diabetes reversal or diabetes cure. So for a long time, we thought diabetes was, a death sentence, but now we know from upcoming evidence that with diet, with lifestyle, and of course with the help of medication, diabetes can be reversed or quote unquote cured. So that's my area of interest in diabetes, and I'm hoping to actually start pursuing a PhD in the not so distant future. I see everyone here has a PhD or pursuing one, so I'm kind of that education bag. My mom is in academics, so I think that the apple did not fall so far from the tree. Actually, Serone, you must know her if you've gotten my surname well. You must, if Google it, you must know her. She was at Egerton for a while. We'll take that discussion offline later on.
Hey guys, really big thank you for the the brief introduction. What I would like to do from this show as well is to try and expand the worldview of the listener, and especially the young people, because sometimes in Kenya I perceive a bit of lethargy in the young generation. When I am very active in social media, as you can imagine, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter. I'm more of a provocateur than really useful there. But nevertheless, I am active in social media. And once in a while, I share links and tips on how to go to countries like Germany for further studies. I have even taken the trouble at one time to create a video where I am demonstrating how to search for a course, how to do a CV using Europe CV template, and how to ask people for help. But what do I get? At the end of the day, people go look at that, watch that video, follow the process, and then they just dump a CV on me without any line, nothing saying, Serone, I've written this CV according to what you advised. Would you please look at it for me and tell me whether it is meeting the, the expectations out there? And I mean, I keep telling people, the reality is in Kenya, we probably can excuse a mistake or an error when you're looking for opportunities to study. But out here, there is a way I expect a PhD candidate to carry themselves. There is a level of documentation and rigor that I expect a PhD candidate or somebody who intends to be one to file their documents and order and organize them. I expect them to read instructions about what are the requirements for a university that they want to apply to. But we have a very lazy entitlement mentality in Kenya sometimes, that you think, Juma is there. He is a medical doctor. I want to go to where he is, but I'm not going to scratch myself. I'm not going to bend and pick anything. I want Juma to prepare everything and bring it to me so that I just go. And I used to even get ridiculous requests like, can you get me a passport? I mean, really, I'm not the immigration department,
Yes.
But and this is what I think I want to do in this course, is really to humanize the struggles that all of you went through. When you went to that point, Moses or Alvin, that you are looking for the opportunity to go abroad, even before we go to diabetes, what made you think about going to study abroad? I have told my story so many times ad nauseum. I feel like not doing it anymore. Let's try and get something fresh.
All right.
What made you think of going to study abroad? Let's start with Moses. And how did you end up in Belgium? And Moses, you didn't tell us your high school, by the way. People are listening to you and they're wondering,
who the hell is this? Now, mine is a long story that was essentially triggered by the family where I come from, and I give a lot of thanks to my dad. He was an education officer, worked in Baringo, so I started actually my schooling in Baringo in Mogotio Primary School. Then went on to, by virtue of his movement, then we found ourselves back to Nakuru. I mean, first of all, Mogotio, Damaravin, Nakuru, then back to Kisii, where I finished my primary school from. Then I went to Kisii High School, where I finished from, went to Maseno University, and from Maseno University, I worked for 4 years as a teacher in high school and also a teacher in technical training institute of technology. Then I got into my actual nutrition work at the academic model providing access to healthcare, where I worked for 2 years. Now, within those 2 years, I worked with people with HIV and AIDS, and quite a complex and intricate thing. But I owe my blessings and the nature of work to the people that I worked with, because patients will come and say, "Nataka kuona Dr. Moses," and it's not about anything. It's really about listening to those patients who were very desperate during the 2007 2009, and then from there, a friend of mine linked me up to a scholarship in Scotland. Not really in Scotland, in Europe, where I applied for a scholarship and I was sponsored by All Saints Educational Trust. It wasn't easy because then I had to reapply, start the application process all the way, and I was lucky to be given the scholarship. And once I received the scholarship, I did not believe that I had been given a scholarship, fully paid fees for my tuition, and then some stipend that would sustain me through the process. So the question was, do I leave my young family and go for study? It was a very delicate decision that I had to make. But in agreement with my wife, then I went to Scotland, did my master's. It was a 1-year program, but I was there for about 1 year and 6 months so that I can make some little money after finishing my course. Then I went back to Kenya. I taught at the Baraton University for 1 year. And then an opportunity arose again at the academic model providing access to healthcare in Amputated in Eldoret, where I came in as the head of nutrition, and I was there for 5 years. This was quite an experience because you see, working in 8 counties in Western Kenya, overseeing the nutrition activities, collaborating with medical officers, the county coordinators of health, going to the health management team meetings and all that builds quite a lot of experience in me. But at the end of the day, the issue is the self-drive to do what you want to do and actually ensure that you can be able to achieve what you want to achieve was extremely important. That's why I'm saying some of the attitudes and inclinations that I have actually arise from family, which is extremely important, but also the self-drive to want to achieve what you want to achieve. So on my 4th year at Amput, I started looking at what else beyond this, because I wanted to look beyond this, and an opportunity arose in Kabarak University, and I went there. But the objective of going to Kabarak was not essentially to go and teach there to teach and that as a destination. I went there as an opportunity for me to pursue my PhD, which came through, lucky enough, in 2018, and so an advertisement was posted at Jomo Kenyatta University. I wasn't suitable for that position, but I actually applied after re-advertisement because they wanted to employ someone who worked within Jomo Kenyatta University. That person was not there. So when I applied and I was shortlisted and I was actually the successful candidate, I was thankful. The key thing here is really about going beyond what everybody else can be able to do. Because you see, the advertisement at Jomo Kenyatta was not Jomo Kenyatta University of Biotechnology and Technology, was not for a person in there, but I threw in my papers with all the confidence that chances are that you can be able to do it. The second thing is really getting to know people who create a network of people who can be able to be helpful to you, but also push yourself. Because, like, for example, the application process was rigorous, expecting you to write a motivation letter that can make sense to people within Kenya and outside Kenya. And all this is information that is available online. So essentially, it's self-drive. It's also an aspect of ensuring that you want excellence in whatever you are doing. And of course, I believe that God blesses people who help other people. The work that I did in Amput, I owe the patients my presence position, because I did it selflessly without having to think about anything. So really is dedication and wanting to help the people that we are working with. And that is what is driving me to think about diabetes, where I'm working on at the moment. Yeah, I think that's my kind of life path.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Moses. And I mean, the reality is, if somebody is just watching today, a young person watching from Kenya and looking at Moses and thinking, wow, I also want to get there, you know, I think the message you are telling them is simple. Don't sit and wait for anybody to bring you anything. You really have to stretch out yourself.
If you allow me, if you allow me, there are two, I'm religious. There are two aspects in the Bible that actually drive me to this. The first one, the story of Moses. God should have asked Moses to use his hand to strike the rock. But why did God ask him, what do you have in the hand? That's a question that you can answer. Yeah. The second one is a lady in the book of 2 Kings who owed people money, and how her children were going to be taken to be slaves. Eli asked her, what do you have? She said 1 drum. And Eli asked her, go and borrow more drums. God of miracles will have delivered drums of oil to this lady, but she was asked, go look for drums. So the question is, what do you have in the hand? What do you have? So that God can fill it up with his blessings.
Thanks a lot, Moses. That's really very enlightening. And you know, the beautiful thing is, despite your education, you haven't looked at the Bible and thought this is a useless book. So that's also a thing.
Yeah.
People who are following us are you know, saying, I see David Davis, Rono Franklin, William Magut from Kabire down in Tindred. Anthony Mwalimu Andoni Keino want to learn more about, so everybody is saying they want to learn about diabetes management. Just give us a minute. As soon as we join the TV crew, we are going to dive into that. Vincent, I've also seen you all the way from Gipsita. Thank you very much. Alvin, you know, I won't
Yes.
let you go. You have to tell us, how did you get there? And what does it take to get to where you are?
Right, just picking up from what Moses actually said, it's self-drive first and foremost. I think the younger generation of today, most of them have this entitlement, as you said, Serenay earlier on. People send you CVs, they want to ask you for passports, but you know, they see the front end of you right now, successful in Germany, you know, but they don't know how much work went into getting you to that point. Well, so my story starts back in high school. I was at Starehe, and I think the system there is what really nurtured us to become self-driven. At Starehe, for example, there were no teachers to chaperone you around. You could go for preps if you wanted. You could go home anytime you wanted. You know, there was no fixed regime. It was all up to you to do stuff as you liked. So if you feel like working hard and succeeding, it was up to you. So to be very honest, in high school, I didn't think about medicine or med school. I just wanted to score an A. That was my drive. And I didn't start getting serious up until maybe, let's say, Form 3 there, when we had to sit for an exam to determine your index number. That's where the drive started, and I knew I just want to get an A. That was it. So got the A, and then what next? I really didn't know. What I knew was I wanted to travel the world. I wanted to explore. I am that kind of type A personality that I want more and more and more and more. So I wanted to do aviation, but I think my mom had better foresight, and she was like, "No, you need to do something more professional. you need to do medicine." So as a compromise, I said, "You know what? Fine, I'll do something science, but I'll do engineering." So she sent me to the Ministry of Education because her background is in education. She's a lecturer. So I went to the ministry and started looking for all these scholarships, and there are many. There's scholarship to Cuba, China, whatever, anywhere you want to go. There's scholarships from the embassies to the Kenyan people. You just have to know where to go. And there's an office, and actually, like I think at that time they're called like deputy secretaries or something, but a very senior officer whose work was just meant to assist Kenyans. Now I went there
on fourth floor, right? On fourth floor
yes.
at Jaguar House, because that's where I found my Chinese scholarship as well. It was pinned on a wall. People think it is a miracle, but that's not. I mean, it's always there, glaring and shouting back at us and saying, "Here I am." Yeah, go on.
Yes, yeah. So I think I was a very impatient 16-year-old, you know, knocking on these doors and hustling and pushing. I want a scholarship, and I remember I got 4 scholarships, and it was up to me now to decide. I wanted a scholarship. Now I got 4. Yeah, so I had to decide. So I remember, like, top on the list, everyone was pushing me to go to Russia, but then I was thinking, okay, you finish school in Russia, and then do people even in Kenya know where Russia is, you know, such things. So I wanted a name recognition that if you graduate from a university, that, you know, if you come and tell someone in Kericho, for example, I was in university XYZ, and they Google you, they'll see that university and they see this is something wonderful. So I crossed out Russia, I crossed out Cuba, I crossed out Turkey, and I chose to stick with Poland. Now, in hindsight, that was one of the best decisions I ever made, because 2 years after I went to Poland, it joined the European Union. So it opened up all this opportunity. And right now, because I qualified in a European Union country, I can basically work across the now 27 states without any limitations. Free movement, I can work anywhere, anytime. At that particular point, and no one should, I'm sure even Moses, I'm sure Serena, you can acknowledge that it's not easy. Yeah, people see you in Europe and they think life is, yeah, it's paved with gold. No, it's not. It was a very hard time. I was there for a long time, and every day, sometimes I felt like quitting, but I'm glad that I actually stayed, and finished my race. And when I came back to Kenya for my postgraduate, is when I realized actually how much work we need to put in Kenya. The systems. In Europe, you don't need to know anyone. It's your brain. No name recognition, no name dropping. No one cares about your background. It's what do you have to offer. So I was quite frustrated in the 4 years that I came for training in Kenya, because there was that, who do you know? You have to give this and that, very frustrating. So right after I finished my course at Aga Khan, I just decided I'm going to go back to Europe, and because that's where there's structure. And if you want to progress, just put in the work and you go up the ladder. So for the young people, I think it's, nothing comes on a silver platter. You have to go for it. There's opportunity all over the place. The other day, I was actually, like you, Serene, I was giving a platform to young doctors who want to go and work in Europe. It's very easy, but funny enough, I didn't get many people coming to ask me, how did you do it? I think people just want license, work, go, but it takes a lot of work. You have to learn the language. In some cases, I had to learn Polish. I did my schooling in Polish, entirely a new language. I never spoke a word of it when I left Nairobi. And it's the end goal that you had, in sight. So I think young people need to, as they say in Swahili, kutaka cha mvunguni shati uiname. You have to toil. You have to, go the extra mile. And the opportunities are right there. Go to Jogo House. Go to embassies. Knock, knock, knock. The Germans have this, what do they call them? Not GIZ. DID.
GTZ.
Yeah, and the dad scholarships. But people are afraid to learn a new language. So everyone wants to troop to England or to the US. But there's more opportunity in Europe. 6 months, 1 year of learning a new language, and then you get into the system. So I think overall, if you want to go to Europe, go for it. But remember, life is not a bed of roses. Everyone there will tell you it's tough, but you stay the course and you'll succeed. And overall, even after you've been there, you should try and come back home and change your little corner of the world. Don't go out there and then disappear. Yeah, come back and try and develop the country. The country invested in you, so you should come back and invest.
I agree. I mean, we will not die out here, Alvin. You should be sure that we are working hard. I mean, I do lots of investments back home in Nandi, and I travel through Baraton when I go to the farm, Moses. Yeah. I'm on the other side between Baraton and Kaiboi. I think you know the geography of that.
I know the geography.
So I think we've laid the ground very well. I see the TV guys are not yet here, and it is my nature not to wait, because I try to teach people that this is what we do in Europe. We agree 7:30, we are at 7:30. So we go to the next level, and then from there we take the, if they are ready and they pick the signal, that would be okay. If not, we continue with the audience that's available on Facebook. So what I want to do now briefly is to play a video that is prepared by Diabetes UK, explaining a bit about the diabetes, and then we come back to answering the question, what is diabetes? And it's just here to show how it looks like in terms of, you know, the impact on the body and some of the questions we will be bringing up. If you allow me a minute, I just turn on the audio. I just share my, but thanks a lot for the very encouraging, you know, insights that you guys have shared. I think that's really very good to get to know the human side of what you've done. So here we are.
In order to provide all your body cells with the energy they need. And also what happens when you have diabetes and this system doesn't work properly. When you eat food that contains carbohydrate, it's broken down in the stomach and digestive system into glucose, which is a type of sugar. We need glucose from food because that's what gives us energy. Carbohydrate containing foods are things like starchy foods, sugary foods, milk and some dairy products, and fruit. This glucose then moves into the bloodstream and the body detects that the blood glucose level is rising. In response to that, the pancreas, which is a little gland that sits just underneath the stomach, starts to release a hormone called insulin. And it's insulin that helps our body get the energy from the food we eat. The bloodstream then takes the glucose and the insulin to every cell in our body that needs it. To make this easier to understand, let's look at muscle cells. At the muscle cells, it's insulin that allows the glucose to get into the cells where it can be used for energy. It's a bit like insulin is a key unlocking the door to the cells so the glucose can get in. That way, the blood glucose level starts to drop. But the blood glucose level can be topped up at any point by the liver releasing extra glucose that it has stored. The blood glucose rises again, and again the pancreas produces more insulin to move with that glucose through the bloodstream to the muscle cells, open the doors and let the glucose in. The body functions best with the blood glucose at an optimum level. It doesn't like it if the blood glucose rises too high. Normally, there's a cycle within the body which balances out the glucose and the insulin level, and this is achieved by the food you eat, the pancreas, and the liver. However, in some people, the system doesn't work properly and they develop diabetes. There are two main types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. In type 1 diabetes...
I think I leave it there. I don't know, Moses and Alvin.
Alvin, yes.
Yeah, I think I leave it there for now, and allow you to take over from there, Alvin, if you want, if you will.
Oh, thank you.
So, what is diabetes? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Serenay. Well, the video has actually well explained it. Diabetes is basically an imbalance between a condition where there's an imbalance between the amount of insulin that is being produced and the control of sugar in the body. That's like a layman's scientific definition. But if you allow me to just maybe describe that video again. So your body has an organ called the pancreas, and the pancreas produces this juice, if you can call it, called insulin. And the purpose of the insulin is basically to facilitate entry of sugars from the bloodstream. Once you've eaten, the food is broken down into simple sugars. We can call them carbohydrates. So if it's in the blood, it's of no use to the body. It must enter the cells. And in the videos you saw, it's they illustrated the sugars or the glucose entering the muscles. Now, insulin is like the doorway. So it opens up the path for the sugars to enter easily into the cells and to be used up in the cells to provide your body with energy. Now, what happens in diabetes, and if I allow me to start with type 1 diabetes, these are young patients usually who are born without the ability of their bodies to produce insulin. Well, there's a very small part of the pancreas that produces insulin, but usually
Yeah.
up to the...
Alvin, your network is a bit wobbly. Would you take it
Sorry.
up again where you were saying you're going to focus on type 1 and just take it up from there? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So yes, there are two types of diabetes, broadly speaking, type 1 and type 2. Type 1, the audience may be familiar, is mostly seen in young people. And this is because in this type of diabetes, the body is not able to produce insulin. And if it's able to produce insulin, it's very small amounts of insulin. So these patients are able to survive until their teens, or some even at a very early age before the symptoms of diabetes come about. And these symptoms commonly are someone feeling excessively thirsty, excessively tired, passing a lot of urine, or eating a lot, or just falling sick very frequently. And most of the time, like I recently had a patient, and she was being told she's just malingering, until a doctor actually decided, let me just check your sugars. And then they realized that she was actually diabetic. So she wasted 5 years, without getting the proper diagnosis because someone was telling her she's malingering, because she was just losing weight, and people are just thinking she's a brooding teenager. Now, in those patients, they need insulin, because without insulin, there's no way you can get the energy into your cells. Now, in type 2, which is mostly associated with lifestyle, think of it like the same doorway. Now, the doorway narrows, and meaning that you're producing less and less insulin over time, because you're bombarding that doorway with too much sugar or too much carbohydrate, right? So the doorway becomes too narrow for the amount of sugars that you're trying to push into that narrow path. This happens in older people, but of not even younger people, because of lack of a better term, westernization of our African culture. Younger people are becoming having type 2 diabetes as well. So eating very processed foods, sedentary lifestyle, lots of sugars. We are seeing that in younger patients, but traditionally this has been something seen in the older generation, people in their 50s and their 60s, because over the years, they keep on pumping up their system with a lot of sugars, and the body, the insulin is not able to keep up with the amount of sugars that you provide it. So that's in broader sense, that's what the different types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. Maybe Moses can chip in, can add something if I miss something.
Moses, you're muted, but I mean, if you want, I can just go to type 2 on the video, and then Moses, you can take it from there, because I just share it again.
Yeah, that's fine.
I just share it again, and
The body isn't producing quite enough insulin, or the insulin it is producing isn't working properly. That can be due to being overweight, because a buildup of fat can stop insulin doing its job properly, but it can also happen in people of a healthy weight. So in type 2 diabetes, the carbohydrate containing food is broken down into glucose in the stomach and digestive system as normal. That glucose then moves into the bloodstream. The pancreas starts to produce insulin, which moves with the glucose through the bloodstream to all the body cells which need glucose for energy. However, the glucose can't always get into the cells because the locks to the cell doors have become furred up with fat deposits. That means that the insulin can't open the cell doors properly. So the level of glucose in the blood continues to rise. In response to this, the pancreas produces even more insulin. So the blood glucose levels continue to rise and the insulin levels continue to rise. This situation is further complicated by the cells, which are desperate for energy, sending out emergency signals to the liver to release stored glucose. The blood glucose level goes up, and the pancreas produces more and more insulin until it can't cope anymore, and eventually it can wear out. As with type 1 diabetes, the symptoms of type 2 diabetes.
Moses, do you want to take over from there?
Yeah, what I was saying is that Dr. Juma has explained it very precisely. From an energy balance perspective, then we are looking at an aspect of intake of food and expenditure of the food. So when Dr. says it is the type of food, dietary intake, which is actually essentially the main source of energy for a human being, is through food. So what you do with the quality of the food that you eat and what you do after eating the food is extremely important. So that is why just to emphasize the importance of the quality and type of food that we eat, which we shall go into define details later on. And the second thing, you have consumed food, what amount of food have you eaten? And then the second question is, what do you do after eating the food? That is where the aspect of physical activity, increasing physical activity and reducing the sedentary lifestyle of just sitting is very important. And these are mechanisms that have been explained, and I appreciate that Dr. brought up these aspects.
Yeah. Thank you very much. But I mean, this is one aspect, isn't it? When we are talking about food and focusing about on food, this is only one aspect of diabetes, isn't it?
Yes.
There is the hereditary part of it. And I don't know whether, Alvin, you want to take over from there.
Yes.
Yes. So research has actually shown that, initially we used to believe, like only type 1 is hereditary. And yes, we do see that in a lot of families. You'll find, maybe an aunt and then a nephew or a niece or a mother and a child, or a grandfather and a grandchild. That's well established. But recently, we're also seeing trends in type 2 diabetes, where, for example, you having a first-degree relative who's diabetic increases your chance by twofold. So twice the chances that compared to the normal population that you also become diabetic. So there is some aspect of genes involved. And this, in a global perspective, you can see certain populations in the world that are more vulnerable to type 2 diabetes. So for example, the Far East, especially Indians, people of Indian origin, as you had in the video, you can have normal weight, but still become diabetic. And that's what most Indian patients or people of Indian origin, I see patients, normal weight, young patients, but with type 2. You can't change your genetics. That happens in the Caribbean. That happens in Australia among the Aborigines, and in the Pacific Islanders. The Fijians and Samoans. They really can't change much about it. Most of them, become diabetic just because of genetics. Now the trick there, if you're an inkling to becoming diabetic because of your genetic makeup or your origin, or you have that in your family, then is to push it back or delay or try and mitigate or try and prevent it, through what Moses is saying now, diet and exercise, because that one you can control. Your genetics, you can't really do much about it.
Okay, thank you very much for that background. I mean, you've laid it very clearly that we have two aspects of it. There is the genetic, and then there is the nutritional stroke behavioral aspect of it, which could aggravate the scenario. I guess in terms of genetics, diabetes is not really a dominant gene, right? So it's not like one of these genes that really has to manifest itself the way the way I'm going to have a black kid with with my wife, because we are both black, we are going to have a black kid. That's because the gene that expresses color, whatever that is dominant. It's not going to just die off unless there is albinism in the blood. But I'm thinking about some of these diseases are actually very I don't know whether there is an epigenetic aspect of it. They are silent genes. They are not really that very active and prominent in that nature, but they require a trigger, so to speak. I don't know whether that is I don't know whether that is fact or fiction, by the way.
If you allow me, let me bring in another dimension. Besides the genetics, early childhood nutrition is extremely important. And here we are talking about maternal nutrition and early childhood. And studies have linked the nutrition during pregnancy and early childhood to incidence of certain non-communicable or chronic diseases. And in a concept that is referred to as the intergenerational origins of disease, which is a theory, but there's a lot of linkage to it. So when nutritionists and healthcare providers insist on the importance and worth of nutrition during pregnancy and early child nutrition, especially in the first 1,000 days, it's trying to forestall this aspect, because it is said that early childhood nutrition then kind of programs the cells to a certain kind of capability or incapability, such that even for those people like the Indians that Dr. has mentioned, if you look at the early childhood, most of the people have been associated with probably malnutrition during childhood, and therefore the cells did not form, or they were programmed to have some inefficiency, such that when they get to an area where there is excessive dietary calories, then the cells are likely to malfunction. So the emphasis here is the worth of nutrition during pregnancy and the early childhood in trying to forestall all these problems that we are seeing that are difficult actually to link. Is it genetics or is it early childhood nutrition? So we have evidence to show that early childhood nutrition and maternal nutrition is extremely important to try and prevent some of these problems.
Actually, if I may just add to that, Moses, very, very good point, because we have the gestational diabetes in pregnancy, and children of mothers who had diabetes in pregnancy, which is a reversible condition, actually do tend to become diabetic in future. And these mothers, most of them, if they don't take care of, again, nutrition, very key, most of them within 5 years will become fully diabetic. So I think it's that cell programming, and we see that in other studies, like the big trial like DCCT or advanced trial, where even once you're diabetic and you do take care of yourself, especially during the early stage of diabetes, that effect is called the legacy effect or metabolic memory. It endures for a very long time, over 20 years. So I think nutrition here is the key point in not just preventing, but also management of whichever type of diabetes.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think there is need, isn't it, for us to really emphasize to everybody who is watching or who would be watching this program later, that this show is not a medical prescription. This is not a consultancy. This is basically kind of, knowledge for public good. Whatever can be passed on without prejudicing your professional, fidelity and your professional attachments. This is what we are doing. And if somebody is really interested in specific knowledge about their personal predisposing factors or even their exposure to possibilities of development of diabetic conditions, it is important that people speak to a qualified medical doctor, qualified Moses. There are cases out there that people speak to Daktari wa mitishamba. Any comment on that? I know Juma will be biased on that. Let's start with you first.
No, Dr. Madawa ya mitishamba, I will be biased about it because I'm coming from a background where we treat diseases with evidence. And I know there's a push at the moment in Kenya to try and use the traditional medicine men in formulating medication. But I think the key thing that we need to think about when you're looking at herbal medicine is that a treatment can have a short-term benefit, but we don't know the long-term effect of this. Number two, there are some compounds that could be available in the medications because they are actually formulated out of a historical background. I give patients fulani dawa akapata nafuu. The circumstances behind the nafuu, we don't know. It could be dietary, it could be not necessarily associated with the medication, it could have a placebo effect. Alikunywa dawa, so psychologically thought that this medication is going to have a beneficial effect to it. So my take is this, it is good for people who are diabetic to take care about using herbal medication because they might have short-term benefits, but we don't know the long-term effects on the metabolic functioning. Number two, we don't know the effect on the kidney. We don't know the compounds, phytochemicals that are within the medications that are going to have an effect on both the metabolic function and the organ systems, looking at the kidney and also looking at the liver. So that's my take for now.
Alvin, anything on your side?
Yeah, I think
your
Moses
bias notwithstanding.
Yeah, Moses has just, he's the nutritionist, he's the expert in this. He's just like killed it. He's gotten it very right. Just to add, though, I don't admonish all herbal medicine because even the so-called Western medicine, it's derived from plants and animals, but it's controlled and there's a dosage system. So maybe the herbalist will give the same compound, but they've not worked out on a proper dosage. But that notwithstanding, I do know of some herbalists who, they don't practice pure herbal medicine. Metformin is a very cheap drug, and it's, that's the best line treatment for diabetes. So they do take these conventional treatments and mix it with their herbs, and you get, the desired effects. So, of course, a patient will strongly believe that it was the herbs, but this herbalist is just taking conventional medicine and mixing with his or her herbs and then getting the desired effect. So I think for it to work, yes, there's benefits. For example, like Mr. Serena, you lived in China, ginseng, ginkgo and all those are things that have benefits, right? But it needs to be regulated. Unfortunately, in Africa, it's not a regulated practice. So everyone is doing their own things. It's hard to distinguish between a herbalist and a witch doctor. I can't tell the difference. So if they had a regulatory body, perhaps, the way we are regulated, then you can practice your medicine very, like in the US, you have the chiropractors. They're not really doctors, but they have a regulatory body and they call themselves doctors because they're regulated and they have standards. So if you do something, out of the norm, then there are penalties. So I think there's room for that once it's regulated. But I think for diabetic patients, as Moses say, you don't want to risk your kidneys, you don't want to risk your heart, you don't want to risk your brain, you don't want to risk your pancreas. You want to stay in the straight and narrow path. So don't take anything that is not known. So unless you talk to your care provider and they tell you this is a safe product, tried and tested, then I'd strongly advise against using herbs or herbal medicine to treat diabetes.
Yeah.
And it's not just about herbal medicine, isn't it, Alvin and Moses? It's about any form of medicine. I mean, if I went to a doctor here in Germany and said, "Hey, I have a running nose, and I'm coughing, uncontrollably, I have a fever," the German doctor would look at me and say, "Okay, go to the apotheker or chemist and buy yourself some herbal tea." Because they are very, very controlled on the amount of drugs that they can prescribe to you as a person. And that's not without reason. That's because when you use these drugs, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alvin, you use these drugs, the body has to clear them. And the way the body clears those drugs is, if there is anything which is excess, the kidney has to do some filtration, and the kidney then becomes an overworked organ. And I guess that's what you're going to explain to us. Why do you amputate people? Why are people amputated in the case of diabetes? Because we've seen here, the body is producing lots of sugar. It is digesting the starch and carbohydrates to produce the glucose. The body is also converting glucose that is stored in the liver into glucose from glycogen or whatever it is. And since the body cannot transfer that from blood into the muscles or the cells, the liver not the liver, but the kidney is left with only one job, to do the waste control that it is supposed to do, and then it gets overworked. And basically, we are killing these two organs. We are killing the liver. We are killing the kidney by pumping lots of this, lots of this stuff. I'm talking as a food scientist. I don't have any background in medicine. What does that mean for the kidney when things are oversupplied and the body doesn't need it?
Let me just come in before Juma comes in. Still on the aspect of using the herbal medicine and just supporting adding some more flesh to what you've asked. There are drug interactions that might occur depending on what someone eats. So that's where the type of medication that someone takes is extremely important. So if someone combines the drugs, that the conventional drugs, with the herbal medicines, it might compromise the function of the curative effect of the both medicines that someone takes. And so therefore, like you're talking about, the combination of these drugs, of course, already overloading the kidney and the liver in trying to purify the blood and remove the toxin and the other compounds that arise from it. It's extremely important for us to be conscious of the fact that there might be a drug-drug interaction that might affect the expected outcome in treatment. So I think, Dr. Juma, please, you can proceed from there.
Yeah, thank you, Moses, for that add-on. That's absolutely true. And that's, even herbs aside, we see a lot of polypharmacy, or where even doctors, or pharmacists prescribe so many drugs that they counter each other. And at the end of the day, you're wondering why a patient is not getting well. It's actually because of some of this, a lot of drug interaction. But to go back to Serena's question about the kidney, yes, actually in the management of diabetes, there are complications. There are two types of complications. There are those ones we call microvascular and macrovascular. So among the microvascular complication, a micro just means the small, and vascular means blood vessels. So among the microvascular, you have complications that affect your legs or your hands, the nerves in your legs and your hands, and you get, burning or pin and needle sensation or tingling. That's called neuropathy. Then you have complications that arise from damage of the small vessels in your kidneys that help to filter, as you said, Serene, filter out the bad stuff from the blood that then is passed out as urine, and that is called diabetes kidney disease. And then you have damage to the small vessels in your eye that supply the eye and allow you to see properly, and that's called diabetes retinopathy. Now, on the other hand, you have the macrovascular, which is now the big vessel. So these patients who suffer from stroke or heart attacks, or as you mentioned, sir, disease, what we call peripheral arterial disease, which now affects blood supply to the toes, to the foot. And when that supply is cut off at a critical point and there's infection, then you're forced to amputate to save the patient's life. But going back to the microvascular complications, specifically the kidneys, that is one organ that is knocked out very early on by diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes. And you find that in most patients, by the time they're being diagnosed with diabetes, they've had these problems ongoing for quite a while, that on diagnosis, they already have a form of kidney disease or diabetes kidney disease or failure. And there's 5 stages of that. And if you don't control the sugar as well, most of the time, the kidneys, they just go down the drain very quickly, and the patient is quickly put on dialysis, which again, many people think it's a solution, but dialysis is actually a very bad thing. That's not a natural thing for your body. And what we advocate for is kidney transplant. That's a bit more natural. Dialysis actually, it's been shown in some studies to actually increase mortality, meaning your chances of dying or the death rate in patients undergoing dialysis is 2 to 5-fold. Yeah, so a patient who's on dialysis is 2 to 5 times likely to die than a patient who's not on dialysis. So people should really take this disease seriously, because the complications are very dire and irreversible.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot, gentlemen. I mean, to the audience that is watching out there and listening to this show, what we are doing today is we are talking about diabetes with 2 key people. One of them, Dr. Alvin Juma, MD, is a diabetologist, a specialist in this area. And Moses Mokaya Mogise is a nutritionist who has had lots of exposure on nutritional interventions in the area of HIV and diabetes. He is doing his PhD at the University of KU Leuven in Belgium, and he is actually based at Kabarak University as a lecturer there. And the PhD is between JKUAT and KU Leuven, just to be to be clear on attribution and affiliation. I think let's talk about diagnostics and then go to interventions. And when you talk about tingling and itching, and part of the motivation why I wanted to talk about this thing is because we've had a ravaging case of diabetes in our family from my mother's side. Her brother died 3 weeks ago, and his children are diabetic, and that is also coming into my family because my elder brother is diabetic as well. And when I heard about this about 2 years ago, I had this, I don't know, I think it's mental. You get affected when you hear something about a disease and you get this feeling, shit, I think I have it, And I started feeling, oh my God, I had some itching and tinkling at the distal, and because I'm over 50, I have my 2-year, medical examination. They call it tooth here, where you go comprehensive. It's everything. And when I went there, I was like, hey, doctor, family doctor, you have to pay close attention to diabetes because there is a history in the family, and I think I have seen some symptoms of me being diabetic. Obviously, when the results came out, they were negative. So, but you know, it's this, you know, the the fear getting the better of me, and just wiring the disease in me. And so I think what I do is really go back to, if we rewind a little and step out of the box and really look at it from out there, how soon should it be screened and how frequently should the screening be? Those are two questions. And the third is, how realistic is this in Kenya? So how soon, how frequent, and how realistic is it to screen in Kenya?
Well, Serena, you've actually asked a very pertinent question. Now, unfortunately, in Kenya, there is no, generally in Africa, apart from South Africa and Egypt, there is no public health screening programs on various diseases. We were hoping with with COVID, you know, the government, you know, having very quickly come up with COVID guidelines, would actually come up with a very robust program in terms of screening and treatment of NCDs or non-communicable diseases. So there are different recommendations from different societies. I'm a bit biased to UK because that's why I did my diabetes. But my family medicine was more biased toward the US, so I stick to those two. But I think a very easy guide for people to follow is one from USPTF, which is a United States Task Force. It's a public health body that advises on screening for different diseases. Now, generally speaking, as you said, in Germany, from the age of 50 onwards, every 2 years. And in the US, in England, they recommend at least from 45, every 3 years, you need to do screening for diabetes. Below that, if you have certain risk factors, one, you're obese or overweight, you have a family member who's diabetic, you had diabetes in pregnancy, you have an ethnic background that is known to have high prevalence for diabetes. So if you're from the Caribbean, Pacific Islands, or the Far East, as we discussed, and in Kenya, that would translate to people from, you know, of Somali origin, people of Kikuyu origin. There's a lot of diabetes in those areas, and of course, people of Asian or Indian origin. If you have hypertension, most of the time those go hand in hand. If you have other endocrine issues, you know, thyroid issues, basically hormonal issues, right? But generally speaking, if you're over the age of 45, some suggest 40, and you do take the test every 3 years. So there's 3 or 4 different types of tests. What is preferred nowadays is a test called HB1AC. That basically checks the average level of sugar in your blood for 3 years. I don't want to get into the science of, let's say, the average sugars, right? That is in cells in the blood called hemoglobin, right? In your red blood cells, sorry. And the good thing about that test is that you don't need to fast. You don't need, it can be done anytime. And there's a certain cutoff above which you can become as at risk of becoming diabetic or pre-diabetes, and over a certain range, usually 6.5, depending on population, you tend to be diabetic. The second most common test, and it's very cheap, is what is called a fasting blood glucose, where you go to hospital before eating anything, or you fasted for 8 hours. And most commonly, most people will not have eaten breakfast. I mean, you don't eat at night, so you can do it before your breakfast. Also, that has specific cutoffs. And then there's a third test, which is usually done if the first two that I've mentioned are not so clear. which is called the glucose tolerance test, which is actually preferred by most diabetologists because it actually tells us in real time how your body reacts when you take food, how the insulin works on the sugars put in the cells. So this test has two portions where you come, you've not eaten anything, they check your blood sugar, and then they give you glucose. Usually 75 grams of glucose, usually the common glucose, or even if in certain places in rural areas, you can just take a soda, a glass of Sprite. And they check sugars after 1 hour and after 2 hours. What you want to check is how your body reacts to that. And if you're above a certain level, usually it's 11 millimoles per liter, then you're clearly diabetic. But if you're between, let's say, I think it's 8 and 11 or 7 and 11, I can't remember the actual range in millimoles, you're termed to be pre-diabetic or having impaired glucose tolerance. And this is where most patients fall. Most patients are not able to assimilate or use glucose properly. And this shows up very many years before they actually become diabetic. So for me, I normally prefer doing that test first, especially in a patient who's obese, a patient who has a very strong family link or a very strong ethnic background of diabetes, because it's an early warning sign. And the good thing, if a patient takes it seriously, you can actually reverse it very easily. So just to recap what you said, testing every 3 years. If you are strong family or ethnic background of diabetes, you're obese or overweight, you're hypertensive, you should do it before 40 or 45, but everyone else should do it over the age of 40 or 45, regardless, because these are things that occur with time.
I mean, I will not ask you things like false positives or false negatives or stuff like this, because when you mentioned about glucose, I remember when I went to the doctor, I was like, I think I am allergic to fructose as well. And not only fructose, but also glucose. And what he did was he gave me a box of glucose that I was getting an oversupply, so to speak. Yeah. So every morning I was making a very concentrated drink. I can't remember the detail on the volumes. I think it was around 100 or 25 ml of water, making a really concentrated glucose drink, and then just and recording my reaction. Am I getting like stomach upsets? How do I feel after I don't know how long? And this is typical in Europe, that you are not necessarily monitored by a doctor. You're given stuff and you're told to take care of yourself and follow and record your reaction and then report back to your doctor. But these are things which are available out there. I think the third question was, how practical is this in Kenya?
No.
Yeah.
Now, as I said, the challenge is that there is no set national framework or system to routinely, screen for these things. The way you have the antenatal or mother and child vaccination, that's a very well set up program. And I think because we place a lot of emphasis on mother and child, but I think going forward, we should also place the population, the young population is going to age and people are going to live longer. So we need to also now look into the future. Now, unfortunately, these tests are very expensive. HbA1c is an expensive test, so it's out of reach of many people. And generally, these people, most of the time, hospitals that offer this screening tests are very exorbitant. Those tests can range from $150 to, in some cases, I've seen even $800. So they're out of the reach of the common man. So unless something is done to just normalize them, or the government to actually pay for this thing, the way you have vaccines for free, the way you have ARVs for free, then we would not get the actual prevalence or the real number of people who are suffering from this disease, or be it to capture it at early stages that then can be easily managed and reversed. So I think the challenge is finances, infrastructure, accessibility, especially to people outside the urban areas or people who don't have access to insurance covers.
Okay, thank you very much. Moses, anything on your side regarding these three questions?
Yeah,
I guess on the testing and then frequency, that's not so much about what you could, but if you have experience with Ampath, that would still be okay. And then we quickly go into nutrition, because I hope you are not going to tell me to stop refilling my Chego.
I love Chego. Now, I think just one other thing to add on to what Dr. has said. Besides the public health guidelines that are supposed to be provided, I think it's on people's own volition that we try and encourage people to have health-seeking behavior. I mean, even if you tell people to drink water every day, they will not drink. But I think if someone has an initiative that they are going to seek for help so that they don't have a short life, it might be beneficial. And I think that the most practical way of going about it, of course, Dr. has enumerated the 3 diagnostic tests that are done for type 2 diabetes. But I think the easy, as much as it's not very accurate, that can be very easily done in any pharmacy across the street, is the fasting blood glucose on purpose. So that you just walk there, you pay your 50 shillings, check your blood glucose when you have not had anything, just to check what it's speaking about your health. Because I think the biggest problem that you're having at the moment, where people are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, already when there's the complications have set in, which makes treatment expensive, it's actually shortened their lifespan and all that. So the sooner we test, the safer we are. And therefore, in case there's any problem, treatment can start early, and then it reduces all these risks of people getting the onset of the complications, both microvascular and macrovascular complications. I think test early, try to test early, make it your own initiative is the message that we need to send out to the people.
Okay, I think we've heard about the the disease condition, how it comes about, the the biochemistry, and thanks a lot to all of you. Continuing with the conversation out there. I mean, I've seen you, Robbie. You're asking about Rob Kiro. You're asking about how do we scale down this information to the villages. There is no better way to do it. It's you guys to do it. Send this message, send these videos. It will be available on YouTube. Translate it to your families, and especially the next one that we are going into now, which is somebody has been diagnosed, Moses, and Alvin says, hey, I see your APSSC2, whatever it is, a test, and it says you are diabetic. So management starts, right? He will definitely be prescribing some medication, but there is the alternative that you could do as a nutritionist. How does this go about on the two fronts of nutrition and behavior?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. I think one thing which I'm happy that you gave us a disclaimer that this show is not prescriptive. We are not going to tell someone what to do in terms of taking care of their diabetes, because diabetes care is individualized, and therefore the individualization is based on the parameters that have been measured and confirmed by a physician that is seeing the patient. But I think the important things that we need to note about diabetes care is, as Dr. said when discussing about the introduction about diabetes and what it is about, it is really about glucose intake. So the first thing is to try and manage the type of glucose that someone is taking into the body, because the moment someone eats food, the body breaks down the food into the smaller components. We are talking about blood sugar here. I mean glucose, which gets into the blood in the form of blood sugar. So the first thing is to try as much as possible to take in food that will not be so readily digested and release glucose into the system. Let me give this a very practical way of going about it. If someone drinks soda or the high concentrated glucose stuff that you're given by your physicians in Germany, the moment the soda gets into the body, glucose is released immediately and triggers insulin spike immediately, so that it can be able to convert this glucose and open the cells for it to go into the cells. So these are referred to high glycemic index foods. Foods that the moment you take it, it's immediately broken down. The food is not contained within structures. So it's immediately broken down, it's released in the form of glucose. In the next minute, you are going to have a spike in glucose in blood, followed by a spike in insulin also, so that the body tries now to reduce the glucose in the body. So there are foods that will not have this effect. These are foods that are referred to as low glycemic index foods, meaning that you eat the food, it will release glucose, but it will not release glucose with a big spike, and therefore it will not result in a subsequent spike in insulin. To be very practical, these are the foods that we refer to as the whole meal foods. If you're talking about ugali, you're looking at unga ambayo imesagwa kwenye posho. If you buy the one that has been is in a packet, and I'm not trying to bring down the business for people who are packaging this maize flour. I don't want to be taken into court and given, but I'm just giving facts that the processed foods have been broken down, and so they're readily digestible. And the foods that are readily digestible release glucose immediately into the blood and result in insulin resistance. So if someone drinks, for example, soda over a long period of time, what happens is that the cells become insulin resistant. The function that they are supposed to do is not achieved, right? So what is the best approach? Try to eat whole meal foods, foods that are not processed. I gave an example of ugali. Take the milled ugali, or take the wimbi ugali, which has less, it has some little protein, and therefore the breakdown of during the digestion process does not result in instant release of glucose. It's gradual release of glucose, and therefore the insulin is not going to spike, which over a long period of time then results in insulin resistance. Then the other aspect is eating fruits and vegetables.
And just to help people, Moses, because you know my background is food technology,
food science.
and working now in the area that I work in, I see a lot of this as well. It's that what you are saying is when you have refined flour, the unga wa paketi. The process for making them is that the tester, the outer coating of the grain has been removed.
Yes.
And that outer coating contains lots of fiber. And that is the fiber that you get when you get whole meal, like the unga wa rekoreko. If you take maize to the rekoreko and you shaga it, you get the whole grain. As it is, and that whole grain has about roughly, I think, about between 5 and in some cases maybe 10% fiber. And fiber by nature is a very resistant molecule. It doesn't get digested because it's really complex. It's not like starch. Starch gets dissolved, gets digested, you release glucose, but fiber is fairly resistant to digestion. I guess that's what you're saying. So going to whole grains, that means high fiber foods, because that allows the slowing of the digestion. And even though if you could remove the fiber, the food could be high glycemic, here the glycemic index is lowered because there is some part of it which is resistant to digestion.
Precisely, Dr. And thank you very much for that addition. Let me just add something, because you brought in a very important component that I was almost missing out on, the value of fiber in the diet that you eat. Why is fiber removed during the processing process? Is because the fiber is combined with some vegetable oil, for example, in the maize, that is removed, that will shorten the lifespan. So they remove it so that they can extend the lifespan. Ile unga ikae kwenye duka for 6 months. That is why when you mill your unga at home, utasaga kidogo isiharibike. So it's a very selfish thing that they do. But let me just go down to the fiber component about it. So this whole meal food that we are talking about, let's just focus on the main, for example. You meal it, it has fiber, and fiber has many benefits. One, it will not high glycemic index, so therefore in a manisha, it will not result in immediate secretion of glucose during the digestion process and insulin at the same time. So it slows it down. And because fiber is not digested, it's actually fermented in the large intestines. So what happens is that during the fermentation process, it releases some compounds that are kind of provide benefits to the intestinal cells. And this is a very important component, even during the digestion, even during the metabolism process. So these components are extremely important. I'm not going to go down to the details, but these are butyrate, for example, is one of the compounds that is secreted that is very beneficial to the cell. So the moment you eat those foods, you have that benefit. Number two, most fiber could be having other phytochemicals. And some of these phytochemicals are kind of chemicals originating from plant origins that are beneficial to the normal functioning of the body. So fiber, then it is also important because it increases motility of the food within the stomach. And so besides reducing the risk of developing diabetes, it also provides a lot of benefits to the intestinal health of the body. And at this point, maybe I'll want to Dr. Juma to come in and say something about this from a medical perspective. Before then we go back to Serone.
Yeah. And I think you raise a very nice point there on motility, Moses, yes, just to help our people, because fiber is rough. And if you think about it, if you have no fiber in that food, it becomes very, very greasy, very slimy, very slippery. When you have the fiber, it makes it rough, and that is what provides the grip, so that, you know, as the digestive system is doing its peristalsis, as it were, the fiber is helping to grab and really pass on the stuff. And I think somehow there is the benefit, isn't it? Because fiber is coming with lots of enzymes as well. So this is something that you probably didn't mention, and that is why you need sifted maize meal. You remove them because you are removing the lipases, which are going to cause the free fatty acid release and therefore acidity, etc., etc. Sorry, guys, I have to show you that I have a little bit of knowledge other than speaking.
For the benefit of our listeners.
Yeah. And so, because you didn't remove the taster, the outer coating, you have also some very important mineral content, which is coming with the high fiber foods. Yes. There are others which are not beneficial, because if you talk about legumes, you are in the legume area. I have done a lot of work. I have 3 patents now in legumes.
That's nice.
In innovating, and one of the other problems with legumes is you have phytic acid, which is likely to be a problem with I think it's calcium absorption. But that as it may, the benefits outweigh the negative. So I like the fact that you mentioned the high fiber content of food as being one of the key drivers. And I guess this is why in the villages people say wachana na unga ya mahindi, kula unga wa mtama na unga wa, which is the other one, sorghum and millet, because like my brother eats lots of millet food and stuff like that. Daktari, before we steal the thunder from you, I mean, Moses asked you to add something.
No, actually, Moses has just said it as, I don't have anything much to add, but just echo what he said. Actually, as I said earlier on, my focus and the focus of most physicians nowadays is to reverse diabetes, and we have different diet modalities, but first and foremost, what most said about the glycemic index. I tell all my patients about glycemic index. It's something anyone with a smartphone of one shape or another can easily Google, but not just knowing that, for example, like juice has high glycemic index, and potatoes have low or moderate glycemic index, but also the way you cook that food can affect how your body absorbs it, what you cook it with, and the quantity. So it's, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is you can't cherry pick one aspect of diet and think it will work for you. It's a multi-spectrum approach, and that's why it's important for doctors to work hand in hand, with nutritionists, because we have a bird's view and they get their hands dirty in this, so they know how to take patients right through each and every step. What you mentioned about the processed sugars, I mean, with the westernization of our foods, I think in Africa, the more affluent you become, the more westernized your diet, and you forget about this basic traditional foods, which in the West, as we all know, the so-called organic foods, which in Africa is the normal. In the Western world, that's the trend, and they're very expensive, right? Bad food or very fine sugar, it's cheap, but for you to eat healthy food, it becomes very expensive. Now, we're lucky that in Africa, in Kenya in particular, the so-called organic food, you can just go to your shamba, get it, or to the market and get it. But people don't want, to go that extra mile of getting raw food, making it nicely. You want to run to KFC, to your McDonald's, and so on. And that's what's bringing the problem. That food tastes good, but it doesn't do justice to your body. And most of the time, from experience as a student, I would eat like 20 Big Macs. After an hour, you are hungry. So I don't know what they add in those Big Macs or those chocolate bars that you produce there.
But Alvin, I don't know if Moses agrees with me. Where do they go? Where do the Big Macs go? We don't see evidence there, isn't it, Moses? I mean, this guy hasn't put on weight. Like, where do they go?
Because I run like 8K every day. That's why.
Yeah, I think it's an important thing, and just strengthening what I said, that it's not about, it's a combination of what you eat and what you do after eating. So if you eat and sit, the body converts that energy into storage forms, the adipose tissue, resulting in overweight, obesity, and at times obesity that's actually referred to as sickness. So physical activity is extremely important. It has much more benefits than just what we talk about in weight loss. It's much more beneficial to the body in very many ways. So his McDonald's it's expended. So he uses his energy and it benefits the body, which is good.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, and I think this is something that you guys will also help us to understand. So I know that, at Mass, we have lots of emphasis on living healthy. As you can imagine, we have chocolates at every corner. Yeah? So if I turn anywhere, and it's free, if I turn anywhere, I can pick a Twix or a Snickers or whatever it is. And I can't remember the last time I ate it, by the way. So I hope my employer doesn't, watch this. But there are two things, isn't it? One of them is you mentioned activity, Moses, and I guess you need to put a number on that. How much activity do I need per day? I mean, I have a smartwatch. I have set a target of 5,000 steps. I need to do, some cardio. Somebody else watching us is saying, well, I don't care about those. I have a workout, a gym in the house. I have one in the garage here. When COVID came up, my son couldn't go to the gym and I had to invest in buying. So I have a gym, which is basically lying idle because he's back at the university in Groningen. But we don't need all those. We don't need to invest in a gym. I think this is really, let's make it as common sense as possible. And if you think about the McDonald's thing that you are talking about, Alvin, at Mars, we know that for every burger that you eat, you actually need them to do 5 kilometers of brisk pace thereafter. I mean, it's not a joke. There is, everywhere I walk around in the company, it's written there. If you've taken one mark, you need to do 5 kilometers to burn up that energy. It's all about the negative energy balance. Do you want to go in that direction, Moses, to answer the question, A, how much of this exercise and what are these common sense exercise opportunities that we have, including running in the bushes, not necessarily going to a gym or anything?
Before Moses goes for it, the trick is this: walk to the McDonald's, eat it, and then walk back home. Moses, carry on.
That's a nice one. You just hope that the McDonald's is not just a corner away from your residence. Yeah, but I think that's a very important question that you're asking. So we are moving from, as much as we have not dealt so much about the foods, which we can't do in one session, but I think having talked about energy intake and qualified the type of energy, especially carbohydrate that we need to focus on what happens then after eating. And that takes us to physical activity or exercise, depending on how you want to look at it. Dr. Juma mentioned that he walks, he runs, he takes his run. But I think we need to demystify what physical activity means. Because first of all, let's start from the basics. Physical activity is first of all a stressor to the body. So how you do it is extremely important because physical activity can only be beneficial to you if it is sustained. So number two, you don't have to do a costly exercise. What you need to do is something that will increase your energy output so that you expend the energy from the food that you ate. Otherwise, the body preserves that energy. And that energy will be preserved in adipose tissue or fat cells in your body. And these fat cells will then increase the chances of you getting diabetes, as Dr. explained at the beginning. So what we want to do, eat your food, engage in some physical activity. And how do you measure physical activity that is beneficial to your body? There is no fast, thumb of rule to it. But if you do physical activity that increases your heartbeat for more than 30 minutes in a day, that has been shown to improve chances of reducing the risk of developing diabetes or improving your general health. It's a very simple thing. Anything that increases your physical activity, increases your heartbeat, you can actually feel it. You can feel that my heartbeat is higher than normal for more than 30 minutes in a day. Routinely, ideally, it's supposed to be for more than 3 days in a week. That can be beneficial to you. What can this involve? One, very basic. If you don't want to go out, you can have a little step. You can even take a block from out there, put it in the house, have a block, you step on and step down. Unakanyaga ukiteremka, 30 minutes a day, that can be good enough. The other practical thing for those people that have access to internet and stuff like that is probably getting into online sessions where you can actually do a gym inside the house, but just watching something on a video. That's a possibility. The other one is probably taking yoga because it stretches your body, it helps to improve your health. For those who can walk, and what I usually say, walking is good because then you have fresh air out there. You can be able to interact in an environment that is safe and you know it's good enough. You can actually walk. Walk from one place to another. Time yourself. Say 30 minutes. Start slowly. One thing before I go into the depth of this is that, as I said, physical activity is a stressor to the body. make it enjoyable. And the fact that it's a stressor to the body, it means that if you have not engaged in physical activity, start slowly. It's like unafunza mtoto kutembea. Start slowly. The moment you start on high intensity, it means that your body is likely to be injured, soft tissue injuries. There is accumulation of lactic acid in the muscle that might cause pain later on, and then you will be discouraged about it. So the thing is, start slowly, first of all. Let your body be introduced to this new thing that you are doing if you have not been doing it. Then we talk about intensity of physical activity. So the benefits of physical activity can be measured either by the intensity or duration. So if you have an intensity that increases your heartbeat to a certain level, then it can be very high intensity, it can be low intensity. So as you are starting the physical activity or you are continuing in physical activity, you can actually taper up the intensity as time goes by. We know from evidence that the higher the physical activity, the intensity of physical activity, the higher the benefits. However, it's recommended that we start slow so that it can be sustained, because physical activity can only be beneficial if it's sustained. And then the other thing is some people might get into physical activity sessions and their focus is to lose weight. I have not very good news for people who get into physical activity with a short-term objective of losing weight. You might be disappointed, because you might actually gain some weight. And why will you gain weight? Because the moment you engage in physical activity, you start engaging in physical activity, the energy demands of the body increases. This translates to a marginally higher appetite. It also translates to higher water intake. So the water intake, the increased appetite, slightly increased appetite, might actually make you to gain weight in the first month or even to the second month. So your focus should not be on the weighing scale. The readings on the weighing scale might mislead you, because the benefits that you get in physical activity might not necessarily be read on the weighing scale. You are talking about cardiovascular function. You are talking about the function of the heart muscle. You are talking about blood circulation. You are talking about muscle toning. You are talking about the release of hormones, endorphins, that make you feel good when you do physical activity. All these things, you cannot you cannot measure them on the weighing scale. And over a long period of time, so these benefits actually accrue. And at the end of the day, the body tones down. And then that's when you might start seeing weight loss, maybe up to 6 months. So physical activity is take it slowly, make it enjoyable. The benefits are not immediate. They're going to be long-term. The benefits are much more than losing weight. I think these are very important things that we need to do. Then make it practical. Chukua mawe pale nje kwa nyumba yako, weka ndani ya nyumba, you step up, come down. Step down, come down. Do it 30 minutes a day, start slowly and increase as time goes by. Mwili itakwambia hapa naweza nikastrain kidogo. I can now change and do something else. And it's very beneficial. Then the other question I'm sure that people would be asking is, then what is the best exercise for me? Walking has been shown to be beneficial. So you don't have to run, you can walk. Start by walking slowly and then increase the speed of walking, and that is very beneficial. For most people who have type 2 diabetes, these are people who are probably in their 40s, going to their 50s, going to their 60s. Running might not be beneficial to you. It might trigger other conditions. If, for example, someone has a comorbidity of a heart condition or hypertension. So the recommendation is start by walking. Walk fast, increase the pace, swing your hand, make as much movement on your body as you can. That can be beneficial. You can do that in the house, you can do it out there, you can watch clips, you can go to the gym if you have the money to spend, but the problem with the gym is at times it may not be sustainable. And the moment you stop it, you lose the benefits in half the time that you invested in the benefits. So I think that's all I can say, and I want to leave it back to both of you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I mean, I'm getting a question or two, one of them from Naftali Sawe, my old friend. Thanks a lot, Carbon. You're watching us from Connecticut. I think you don't say Connecticut, you say Connecticut. Naftali saw a very informative chip. Chirchir is asking, I don't know, Alvin, when you were at Tigaton, did you meet Mr. Mehta, Paul Mehta? Paul Mehta had triplets, and one of the daughter, Dr. Chirchir Tuwei, is asking, does one need to exercise immediately after eating if you want to control diabetes with diets? So I guess the question is, how long should you wait before you exercise or before you do that physical exercise?
or the optimal time.
Yeah.
Now, there are many studies conducted to basically try and figure out when is the best time to exercise. And I think the jury is still out, but most scientists or most researchers feel the best time to exercise in the morning. One, because that's the natural time when your body is fully engaged, to start the day. The cortisols are up. You're actually more energetic in the morning as compared to the evening, so less chances of hurting yourself. Those minor injuries are then discourage you from exercising. And what's generally recommended is you eat after exercising, especially. It all depends on what you want to do. If you want to build muscle bulk, and maybe the nutritionist, Moses, there will correct us, you're generally advised to eat afterwards.
Yes.
Because then the muscles are able to take up these proteins and build up. Now, for diabetic patient, it's a bit different. Generally, we encourage self-training, and you have to check your sugars before you exercise. And forgive me, because I know this reading is more in the American milligrams per deciliter. And if you're not converted to millimoles, you just divide by 18 to the more common British readings. But if your reading before you exercise is less than 100, then you should have a snack before you exercise. If you know you're going to exercise for more than half an hour, you should always have a snack beforehand, because as you exercise, you burn energy and your sugars drop. For all diabetics, basically, they have to have a snack on them anyway at all times, because you never know when your sugars are going to, spuriously drop and you get into a hypo and you can't do anything about that. So check your sugars. You have many patients who are diabetic and they run marathons and they are fine, but they check sugars before they have energy bars on them. That's when your Mars and tweaks and all that come into play. They're very handy for those purposes. Now, if I just go back a bit, this is a challenge that I get with many patients, and they are, okay, so what do I do? As Moses said, actually, physical activity is what you do on a normal day-to-day basis. Yeah, you walk to the shop, you do your chores at home, but exercise is an intentional, repeated effort that wears you out, that exerts your body or puts pressure on your body. But as Moses said, you have to like what you're doing for you to make it something habitual. So if you like walking, then I would suggest you do that. I would not suggest you go running if you don't like running, right? And don't forget there are other activities that you can do at home that are also actually taxing, like going to your farm, to garden. That's actually exercise in one shape or form. Now, we don't get into a lot of details on TM. Just rule of thumb is whatever you like doing, do it and do it well. And if you see over time that it's becoming easy for you or too easy, then you step up. So you try to do it over a shorter period, or you try and make it harder. So for example, if you run 5 kilometers and you're doing it and you're not sweating, then try 6, try 7, try 10, right? Or try to do that 5 kilometers. Instead of doing it in half an hour, do it in 15 minutes. So that way you keep on challenging your body. But I like the way Moses described it. I don't want to, steal the thunder from him. Very good explanation on that one. I think he did justice on it. Yeah, just pick a fight and stick with it. That will be my take home from what you say.
Thanks a lot. I mean, this is
so to
really
answer
useful.
the question.
Yeah.
So to answer the question in a nutshell is try and exercise in the morning, and then eat after that, but don't add on all the calories that you've burnt, you know, by, you know, you work out and then you go and eat 2 pizzas. It just cancels out. Yeah. So exercise plus proper diet. That's what I'd say.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, it's really helpful. And Sami, I've seen your question. Yes, we've said that it is genetic. He's asking whether there is a genetic link to the fact that there is an aspect of diabetes running in the family. And this is my cousin. So he's obviously speaking from a point of concern. Mike, I have seen your question, and I think it's a very fair one that next time we speak about mental health. Now, there are two things that I do not want us to, and if you feel that we could come back to them, it is okay. But Moses, you mentioned the foods that are good, right? And the ones that are to be avoided. And it was more on a focus on carbohydrates. And then, you know, Alvin, you're talking about the way you work and stuff like this. I know in the US, it's a bit of a problem. I go to Tennessee almost once or twice a year, you know, to our business there. And coming from Germany, I like to walk. So between my hotel and the company is 2 kilometers. And I like to get my rucksack and just walk, you know, because I know by the time I get there, I'll have covered my 2 kilometers. If I'm going to go for dinner in the evening, and you know how heavy the American dinners are, I will have some level of compensation for that intake of calories. I guess I come back to the fact that when I walk, I see lots of people hooting on the road. It's like unusual to walk in the US. They might think I'm actually a thief or something like that. I mean, I have never figured out why they do that. I mean, for me, it's normal. Yeah, I'm walking. It's not because I can't hail an Uber or take a rental car because, you know, as a business trip, I have access to a rental car, but I want to walk. And these guys don't want to walk. You know, guys in the US, tell us why you don't like to walk. And there is something that I did when I was managing my weight. I know you mentioned it, Moses. At one time, I had gone up to 100 kilos. And then I looked at it, and it was this time when I was hearing about diabetes, and I started worrying about it. And I thought, smartwatch, set my record, set my target, and that's it. And I managed. You know, I came down to 80. And then what happened? So I lost fat as usual. And then I gained muscle. And by gaining muscle, the reverse came, you know, like I was gaining weight, which happened. I think the question I'm trying to ask is, to what extent do we get people to really count their calories? Like when I take this milk, I look at it and say, ooh, I think I'm going to get here 798 kilocalories. If I take the whole, you know, the whole 1 liter. So instead of drinking milk, let me drink water instead. Because water will be 0 calories. I will be getting 78% water in the milk. But the problem is I'm loading myself with the fat. If I drink water, I'm getting 0 calories, and I'm getting the 78 plus another 22% water. To what extent does counting calories help? That is one. And then there is the question on, we are looking at the person that we are feeding. But I think there is something we are forgetting. We are also feeding the microbiology in our system. We are feeding the microbiome. We are feeding the bacteria. We are feeding the fungi. We are feeding whatever it is that is in our digestive system. And those guys definitely contribute to disease conditions. I don't know. If you guys say we don't touch that today, I'm happy that we come back for it another time. Moses.
So before Moses maybe goes for it, because I'm sure he's going to be comprehensive of that. actually, Moses, if you've not thought about this, maybe you should do this when you go back to Kenya. In Ireland, there's a company that is making a kale. So Renee, to answer you, they've taken the headache out of you. They make meals for you, which have calories already. So, you know, my lunch will be 900 calories. My dinner will be 300 calories, whatever you choose. You choose your meal plan. And that counting is out. And it works very well with diabetes patients. And when I'm on intensive training, I also go on that diet, and it's amazing. But over to Moses, you can tell us how to do carb counting.
Well, and as you do that, Moses, so everybody here is asking me now, I'm getting 3 questions to tell us, what are the good foods for a diabetic? Like we say, there is no one fits all. We have to be very careful. So your answer must be tempered with that warning. Go on, Moses.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say that right from the beginning. The moment you talk about carbohydrate counting, then you are talking about, we are starting from a patient X, not patient Y, and not patient X, Y, Z, and giving them a common advice. So carbohydrate counting is usually done to regulate and control the amount of energy or caloric intake that someone takes in. So it is designed specifically for a specific person. So what essentially is done is trying to look at what food do you eat, then how much of this food are we going to give you so that we don't provide you with more energy than you actually need, and that might result in a high glucose or intake, which might then trigger the other problems of hyperglycemia or high blood sugar. So essentially that's what it means. But to be very careful and not to get into a controversial argument, as you said, Dr. Sirone, carbohydrate counting is individualized for a specific patient. Yeah, and it's essentially looking at the sources, the major source of energy, carbohydrates specifically, fat and proteins, and then reducing it down. Now, at the moment, there's a lot of emphasis on trying to control diets so that we can reduce the amount of intake of carbohydrates specifically. And the emphasis now is, studies are now showing that the bigger problem is actually carbohydrates. And the moment you control the carbohydrate intake, then we are very likely to control caloric intake. And the moment you control caloric intake, you can actually achieve a near treatment state for patients. I know Dr. might mention about the remission of diabetes or treating diabetes completely so that someone doesn't have diabetes anymore. But these are the approaches that are used at the moment. It is something that is going on, but it's not a happening. It's a process that is very long, and that's why we say that it's good for us to catch diabetes when it is early and start treatment early. Then you can be able to achieve reversal of diabetes or remission of diabetes easily. So I want to be that brief on counting calories. And then the second aspect is a microbiome. I mentioned, and thank you, Dr. for bringing us to this, because there's a big, there's a lot of studies that are going on now on how diets and other activities, including physical activity, are affecting the gut microbiota, the good bodies that are in the body. Just as a word of information, we have more bacteria in our bodies than blood cells, than cells actually. So you see the magnitude of things that we are dealing with. And and there has been analysis showing the type of food that you eat, how it affects the type, concentration, and the number of species of microbiota in the gut. And the type of microbiota that we have in the gut actually have a leaning in simple aspects like metabolism, future comorbidities like cancer, and all those other complications that we have. So what has been shown is that eating foods, whole meal foods from the carbohydrates, and then eating fruits and vegetables in higher amounts, as opposed to eating the Western diet that has a lot of sugar and has a lot of carbohydrates, has much more benefit to the gut microbiota. And this has been shown to actually have an effect in reducing chronic diseases, including cardiovascular diseases, worsening or onset of diabetes, and also other complications relating to, for example, even up to blood pressure. And people who are obese or who are overweight have been shown to have a different combination of gut microbiota compared to those that are lean and that engage in physical activity. Then the other thing that I also want to say, still on the same aspect, so you're talking about obesity and overweight, Dr. mentioned something that is very important for us to know, so that we don't make people who are a bit overweight feel like they're doomed. There are people that are overweight, but when we do analysis on them, blood tests, they might be having better blood profile as compared to those that are lean. And this comes out from the aspect of what you do after eating. Engaging in physical activity has been shown to actually improve people's health and reduce their risk to diabetes even when they are overweight. And this is a concept that now is referred to as metabolically healthy obesity, meaning that someone might be obese, but their metabolic health is much better than someone who could be lean. This is just a state that can be, but it is the first step towards improving the health and increasing reducing the chances of hypertension, diabetes, and other chronic diseases that come with increased weight. Yeah, so I think I want to stop at that point because we cannot finish this, and I will.
We won't, and I think we need to be fair to time and ourselves. And thank you very much for donating your 2 hours. If you guys agree, I think we could arrange and come back again immediately next week.
Yes.
Because I guess for Alvin there would be 2 questions that are still unanswered. The one is diabetes and COVID-19. I think we shouldn't miss on that opportunity. And then treatment of diabetes. Can it be treated or not? And at what stage can it be treated? And for Moses, I guess the question that's still unanswered here are, what are the bad foods? What are the good foods?
Yes.
If you take an example, and then the other thing which is still unanswered is on the behavior side. I guess there is the thing about personal discipline. If somebody has told you don't touch anything that has a high sugar load, and then you go to a pub and you load yourself with a shot of whiskey and think, it's just one, or you go to a place and just see an irresistible muffin or black forest cake. I'm talking about things that are likely not there in Kenya, by the way. So you guys have to really forgive me for being out of touch. Or a glass of mursik, for example. So I guess if you think about it, we've just scratched the surface.
Yes.
If you would be generous enough again next week, we come back for another 2 hours on Saturday, and then we take it from here. We've laid the ground very well, familiarized ourselves with ourselves. Somebody who doesn't think we know each other that much. We only connected in the last 24 hours, I think 48 hours with Moses, possibly 36 hours with Alvin. And we've only met here online in the last couple of hours. Shall we go for some closing remarks? And if you accept my invitation, let me know.
Okay.
Moses, and then we go to Dr. Hari.
Thank you.
Anything you want to say? You can take another 1 hour. You can take 10 minutes. You can take 2 minutes. It's up to you now.
No, I'm going to be brief. I'm going to be brief because we have other things to do. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Daktari. By the way, I was just referred to by a colleague of mine who teaches at Kabarak High School. And so when she saw your post, she tagged it on me and I responded. And thank you very much. It's a good opportunity. And I think the question that you're asking is that, do we need to go back home after being abroad for us to make a change? Yes, even what we're doing at the moment, I think is extremely important. If it were possible for me to speak in my Ekegusi and speak to the people in Kisi through such forum, I would be very delighted to do it. And so this is a good opportunity. I wish we had a way of translating so that when I'm speaking like this, you are speaking to the mother in Nandi, in Kapsowar, or somewhere who actually understands these things in a very basic way. The question on whether I'll be available next week, yes, I'll be available with pleasure. Thank you very much.
For me, of course, Serena, thank you very much. Moses, thank you for joining. In fact, when I saw you joining the show, I was very happy because management of diabetes or any lifestyle disease is multidisciplinary. No, it's not just for the doctor, for the nutritionist, for the nurse, or for the surgeon, for the eye doctor. It's everyone. But at the center of it all, the most important person is the patient, right? So the motivation or the drive of the patient to get well is what motivates the rest of the team. And I think in these last 2 hours, we've set the right pace, and I'll be very willing to come and drive this message forward next weekend. And I don't know, maybe Serena, you should consider having a health segment every so often, just to put it out there. 50% of diabetic patients with chronic disease have depression, for example, which goes unnoticed, and that affects their treatment, how their motivation to stick to their treatment plans and all that. And I'm happy because you brought me on this program, because if you look at my my tag on the Zoom, you can see DQ by Alvin Juma. So I started this during COVID, something similar, but because of work commitments, I couldn't follow it through. So I'm happy that someone else, the universe, has connected us, and we're able to impact a bigger audience. And I'm very happy. This is something more people in the diaspora should actually do. Not even diaspora, people within Kenya, to educate the public. Unfortunately, our government of the state doesn't have such initiatives. So it's up to us as a citizen, to step up to the plate and fill that vacuum, because the health of our people, is the biggest resource that we have. Thank you.
Right. Guys, I mean, I don't know how to say it in English, but usually when I speak in Nandi, I say, Kiamnegi tujne. What do we eat? What do we live? I mean, I don't know how to translate. You see, this is the problem of being multilingual. I speak five languages very fluently. And this is what I was telling Juma before you came, that we try to put a face to science, because some people think scientists are very nerdy and very boring. It's not. Science is sexy, as you can see, the three of us here.
Sure.
Yeah. So really, I think I bring all of us again. So really a big thank you to you three. I mean, to the two of you gentlemen, for finding time. I agree with you. I mean, Moses did mention to me yesterday already that there is a lot of stress management that is going into diabetics and stuff like that. And I think what we do going forward is to explore the potential to add on to this list and bring on people that can add value in the conversation as well.
Yes,
and also rely on the people who are watching us to take this conversation in their mother tongue to the villages, to the households, through WhatsApp groups and whatever other medium that can help us to take this message. And the message, what is the message? The message is that there is a lot of knowledge on diabetes. It's not that it is a strange, unknown monster. We know a lot about it. It's just that this knowledge needs to go down to the people that really need it the most. So going forward, we'll try and see. And I guess Moses and I were talking about it yesterday and saying, why do Kenyans not carry around their own insulin? Why don't they have their own sugar measurement gadgets at home? And we identified a few of the challenges that are, going to be part of the conversation next week as well. So thank you very much for finding time. I will have to release all of you now. Do you support any English Premier League team?
Manchester.
I think Alvin looks like no, he's Irish, so he's more like Cardiff. No, but he looks like a Man United guy. Yes. He looks like a Man United guy.
Yes.
I'm not a football enthusiast. I don't do politics or football, but I follow Chelsea closely.
So that is coming slightly later. And Gamama, which one do you follow?
I follow Chelsea.
So we all go to watch Chelsea later with I think Everton. So thank you very much, all of you. All the Man United and Man City guys, just hold it, don't cry. It's just football. Thank you very much for now.
Bye-bye. All right.